Hello and welcome to this week's quick IQ episode where we talk about insights and questions. And today I want to answer a few questions because I got a lot of questions from last week's quick IQ episode where we were talking about the importance of releasing mixed emotions and expanding on that. Today we're going to cover some topics like mental chatter, for example. So that's one of the questions that came in, is that so often people will feel like they can't quiet their mind, like it's chatter constantly. In fact, I've worked with people who have felt like they couldn't go to sleep and they needed to listen to television or music or recordings or something because the mental chatter in their mind was so loud and so constant that it made it hard to sleep. And so the only way they could fall asleep is if they were listening to something else. And I've seen that time and time again, which is a flag, like a wake-up call to say, oh, you really, really want to change that. And so ultimately what we want to do is remember to work with the mind in a different way, because so often this is what people will do. They say, okay, well, we're trying to quiet the mind or just silence the mind or train the mind to just ignore that stuff. But what we really want to do is actually shut those things down because they can affect your health, your life, your happiness, everything at a deeper level. Now, let me give you an example. You hear me use this all of the time. But imagine if you picture a house for a moment and you picture somebody who goes into their house, and inside their house, there's all of these stations playing, radio stations or television stations, but there's a lot of good ones. And then there's also a lot of not so good ones, a lot of ones they don't really like. Now, a lot of times what people do is they're trying to silence their mind. So they're not hearing all of it. So just calm themselves and be quiet or relax or not let it bother them. But ultimately, what we'd really want to do is identify the specific programming and shut it off. The negative programming. And of course, then feel good enjoying the good programming that's there, the positive, feel good, happy thoughts of life is good, life is wonderful, wow, this is fantastic. Like it just feels so good, right? And so that's ultimately what we want to do, of course, to heal, to change, to transform, to live our best lives. And so ultimately, working with the mind in that way where you're really identifying these patterns. Now, part of the reason this came up is because on last week's IQ episode, we talked about how so many people get mixed emotions programmed in their subconscious mind. And some people are actually increasing it where they might do something like this. I mean, we've all heard the phrase that something is a quote unquote blessing in disguise, but you won't want to link that up. Meaning that a person can go through a hardship and say, or whatever, and they go, oh, well, that turned out to be a blessing in disguise. When you link that up, you're basically linking up that, oh, that was a blessing in disguise. Instead of the better reframe, the better way to look at it would to say, give yourself credit and say, oh, that negative thing happened, but you turned and you changed your circumstances into a win. So you can turn anything into a win. That's better, because if you link up something positive with something negative, it perpetuates. And by the way, a simple example you hear me use all of the time is this. That, for example, let's say somebody with self-criticism, they might say something like, oh, I look horrible in this shirt. And of course, the response is supposed to be, no, you don't. You look great. And so what happens is then a person's mind gets reinforced that if they criticize themselves, they get a compliment. Like, I look horrible in this. No, you don't. You look great. So it's reassurance, a compliment, and that gets linked up. And then it keeps the mind doing that same thing. So then what happens is the mind criticizes and criticizes and criticizes because it's linked up to a reward also. And so it perpetuates the problem. Or even, on last week's IQ episode, we talk about when people call something a blessing or a gift, and they link up gift to something negative. So I've seen people before where they say, oh, this negative situation, this illness or problem or hardship or crisis was such a gift or a blessing in disguise. As soon as that gets linked up, it can create that chatter, that fear at the subconscious mind, because it gets stuck there, even if the brain knows better. And when we think about mixed emotions, we experience them all of the time. For example, another example is that somebody can feel they can love a person and also simultaneously be mad at somebody. And so those can both exist at the same time. And so even those mixed emotions matter. You wouldn't want to just say, well, I love them anyway. You'd want to, of course, resolve that negativity. If you're mad at them or upset or resentful or whatnot, you'd want to resolve that and release that. So we don't want to get that negative programming connected to a blessing in disguise or a gift or anything like that at all, right? Because it perpetuates the problem. Now, that's one question that came in of somebody asking a question about all of that. So that's one piece. Now, another question that came in was actually regarding the topic of the feelings of dying in general. And somebody asked, should we make peace with dying? And the thing of it is, optimally, we wouldn't want to send a bunch of positive emotions towards dying. The way to look at it is like this, okay? Think about if you're climbing a mountain. Now, if you're climbing a hill, you're hiking up a hill, you don't want to be terrified of falling off a cliff. You don't want to say, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid of falling off the cliff, that you're not enjoying the hike, right? You want to be able to enjoy the hike. So we don't want a bunch of fear towards falling off of a cliff, but at the same time, we don't want to go up a hike and say, well, I don't care if I fall off the cliff or not. We don't want that programming either. We want to have the feeling that says, don't fall off the cliff. So both are true. We don't want to be terrified of it. So if we apply this to dying for a moment, and death, we don't want to link up that I don't care if I die or not. No, we want to be here in the present moment, enjoying the presence of life. But we also don't want to be terrified so much so that we're not enjoying our life experience either. And that's the energy. To give you another example, it's kind of like, if somebody does, let's say, for example, somebody goes through a divorce, they don't want to be in a relationship where they're terrified of a divorce the whole time, okay? They don't want to do that because it takes away the joy of the relationship. But let's say somebody's going through a relationship, they got married, they're loving life, and they start making peace with divorce. They go, I don't care if I get divorced or not. Well, that's not the energy you want to have either. You want to have the feeling of really wanting, the relationship. My point is whatever you want to feel the most energy towards that. And part of the reason somebody messaged in and said, should I start, but is it good to actually send positive energy towards dying? And I would say not optimally, not unless you want to. And the unfortunate thing is I've seen people before who I've never seen anybody die who didn't on some level want to. And so where they just say, look, I'm tired of life. And so what happens is if somebody goes, I'm tired of life, and they've then simultaneously also made peace with dying, and they feel more and more like I'm tired of life, and then they've made peace with dying, then their energy wants to go in that direction. And of course, some people might say, well, what should I do for my soul? Well, your soul's growth, your soul's being, the best you can live this life in happiness and joy and good positive energy and love and connection. That is good for your soul now and for your soul afterlife, whatever next life, whatever your beliefs are. Living your best, loving, happiest, most joyous life in this lifetime is the best thing you can do for your afterlife, next life, whatever you want to call it for your belief system. And so that's the insight. So it's not about making peace with dying doesn't do the most for your afterlife. What does the most for your afterlife or next life is living the best of this life, in love, in happiness, in joy, in connection. And so I hope that answers the question, because it was like, should we really make peace with dying? The answer is not really. Be present, be in love with life, enjoy it. Now, if you have so much fear towards dying, then yeah, you'd want to resolve that so it's not intruding on your life. But I have to say, again, as I talked about in the last IQ episode, so often when people have a lot of fear towards dying, it's either because they've linked up feelings of wanting to die or deserving to die or expecting to die, and that's why it's creating so much fear. In my own life, I had a fear of dying, and part of the thing is I felt like I was supposed to, like it was good if I died for others. So I had this feeling of fear, the ticker tape, in my subconscious mind that I thought was silly. So it wasn't like I was in panic or anxiety or anything like that about it. It was just suppressed, like, oh, that's crazy. That doesn't matter. But it was still affecting me. I just didn't realize it was affecting me because it was, quote unquote, insignificant. And so these are the insights that I want to share with you, which I know there's a depth here. There's a huge depth, and it really comes down to go deeper. It's not just about positive thinking or affirmations and meditation and all of the things and the binaural beats or the frequencies or whatnot, and all of those things could be great. But when I really, really, really see the real results is when we identify specific emotions, specific emotional patterns, we really rewire the mind at a deeper level, and it creates a sense of peace, of joy, of happiness, that inner peace of healing, of happiness, of joy, of alignment that's profound. And that's when I see healing and transformation take place. And so that, of course, is my hope for you. And if you are somebody who's struggling with mental chatter or whatnot, I'd invite you to look at that and identify it and really then say, okay, this is a problem. So often part of the problem in our culture is we don't see it as a problem. The other part is that even when it does, we think, oh, well, let's just quiet our mind or let's fill it with some different noise, right? But we don't realize we actually need to get it to stop. We want to get it to stop. That is healing. That is transformation. That's real transformation, is also when that repeated thought programming feels good. That's transformation. That's where we want to go. So food for thought on that. And so that's this week's quick IQ episode. It has been such a pleasure connecting with you. And as always, please do take just a quick moment to hit the share button on this episode. Share it with somebody you love, somebody you care about, or somebody you don't even know. Because the more that every single person in our world feels happy and healthy and loved and loving, the better this world is for all of us. And so please do make a point to hit the share button, and please do make a point to have an incredible rest of your day. And I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. We'll see you there.